Hi, I'm Alison, and this is the CustomerX Files. Professionally speaking, my background is rooted in marketing, but last year I ditched the CMO career path and followed my true passion, putting the customer at the forefront of business strategy. You could say I'm all in on the overall customer experience. As I always say, we are people before we're professionals, so personally speaking, you'll often find me spending time with my teenage daughters, traveling, cooking, exploring thrift shops, or hiking on secluded trails. Tom Petty fills up much of my playlist, British programming is often on TV, and as an English major, oddly, my reading list is surprisingly short. But there's only so many hours in the day, the cats knock my book away, or the dogs are begging for me to take them for a walk. More importantly, thank you. Thank you for joining me each and every episode with my incredible guests. We're so happy to have you here and so happy to have you join the conversation. Hello, everybody. I am beyond excited today to introduce Carlos Gonzalez. So Carlos and I met just recently, but once we had our first conversation, I didn't think twice about having him join us for an episode. It really wasn't optional in my mind. It was necessary. Professionally speaking, Carlos has over 20 years of experience in human capital management in that industry. He's worked for organizations like ADP, Dayforce, Insperity, Sage, and UKG. And actually, Carlos started in sales, which I think is awesome because a transition from sales to customer advocacy, we always kind of look at where are some of those career paths or parallels, but he made that transition so he could focus on his passion of building the best customer experience through customer engagement, through customer advocacy, and reference programs. Carlos has built global reference programs. He's been recognized with numerous awards for business impact, customer success, marketing automation, tech stack, event marketing, and then also program ROI. So you can already kind of see we're going to have a great conversation today. And personally, I've learned a few things about Carlos. We bonded over the fact that our roots are both in the Midwestern United States, and he, like me, is a diehard Green Bay Packers fan. So I know I can trust somebody when they're rooting for the same football team. Carlos, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Alison. It's great to be here.
So, Carlos, we're going to talk about all different things, customer marketing and advocacy today, because you have such a thoughtful and a strategic perspective. So let's just start out with the basics, and then we'll get more granular. Very simply put, what value does a customer advocacy program bring to an organization?
I don't like cliches, and it sounds so cliche to have something that's a win-win situation, but customer advocacy programs are such a benefit to the clients themselves. When positioned correctly, it's not a burden. It's not a task for them. It elevates them professionally. So it's a competitive differentiator when a company or a prospect is seeking a vendor and they're looking at two different vendors and they're saying, well, both companies can provide this product, but what's the customer experience look like? Which one's going to help me with my career and advance me and highlight my successes? And from the company's perspective, so many of their challenges can be resolved and addressed through the customer base. So the company can mobilize these experts in the industry using their products, and the customers can have their successes highlighted. So it's a phenomenal benefit to both. So when you bring that all together and mobilize your customer base, you can really grow an organization's revenues and reach results much more quickly.
And I alluded to the importance of measurement and metrics. And at least in my career, in the time that I've been in customer marketing and customer advocacy roles, it has changed significantly. The landscape is very different than it was 15 to 20 years ago. I think measurement is one of those things. But how have you seen reference management and customer advocacy evolve over the course of, your illustrious career?
I think it's so important to track things that hit the bottom line, not activity or not touches or things like that, or quantity of people who maybe they're potential references, but how much revenue has been impacted? Where did this turn into an opportunity, and how many dollars were impacted, and how has that changed? What kind of close ratio are we seeing when we have a control group of opportunities where a reference was not used, and a similar product and segment where references are used. What's the close rate? How long did it take to close that? If you can accelerate close rates, and you can have potentially larger deals, if you can knock competitors out of the situation because you introduce a reference who came from that competitor and they can speak to the advantages of your company, that's really powerful. And you can do an analysis of that. You can see where references are used. We have larger deals because they have add-on. They talk about other products they buy from you. We have an acceleration. Maybe the time frame is shorter, and less attrition in the sales cycle.
And also, you and I have touched upon, we share a similar philosophy, I think, on gifting or the role of gamification, gifting. A lot of these things have come up, in the last several years. Can you speak to that a little bit and what you've seen over the last maybe decade or so?
Sure. I'm a firm believer because I've learned firsthand at what works well and what doesn't work really well. Advocates advocate for a specific reason. They want to have their motivational drivers that trigger oxytocin, that make them feel loved and appreciated and elevated. They want to have an opportunity to talk about their successes, to show what outcomes they've reached. They want to be able to connect with their peers. They want to have their successes highlighted in front of their boss and at their own company. That's great value to them. We can turn them into superheroes by saying, hey, you get this. You use our product in your industry, your geography, maybe globally, and you reach these results. That's pretty fantastic. Coming to a customer and telling them that and saying, we've selected you to talk to this prestigious prospect because they want to pick your brain. We introduce you to that company as a success in your domain. That's highly valuable. That's a big difference, and that's a motivational driver. That's an earned type of advocacy when it's mutually beneficial. And we're not asking a reference to do a favor for the company. It's not, hey, could you do this for me because I need this sale, and I'll give you $25, or I'll send you some swag or something like that. Or that's gamification. Typically, was a dopamine triggered hormone. It'd be, if you do this, we'll give you some points, and you'll get the swag or this reward, and hopefully you'll keep doing that in kind of like a game. And how many points can you earn? And that was very common a long time ago. And some programs still do that. But what happens is you have an early adoption. It's kind of like playing a game, and you have this novelty, and then the novelty wears off, and you have attrition to the program. When you have a program that's presenting valuable opportunities in an ongoing state, that's something people really appreciate. If you think of, if I reach out to a customer and say, can you do a favor for me? Can you do another, can you clean out my garage? Can you drive me to the airport in the middle of the night? Those favors get tiresome very quickly. Whereas, hey, I have an opportunity for you to look pretty cool in front of this organization, or maybe just a reference conversation, or maybe on stage, or maybe in our marketing assets, because you have a very valid message to send. That's so powerful. So there's two very distinct models, and I'm a big proponent of presenting that valuable opportunity. And then your customers, your advocates go, wow, they're perpetually presenting me with opportunities that make me look good, that document my successes. One, I'm not going to churn because, yeah, I guess I am successful, and I have a great story to share. That's one of the things I love about the space, is that it brings such value to the advocates. And then as an organization wanting to highlight your successes and to drive a larger pipeline and faster revenue, it does that for the organization. So it's pretty cool.
Well, and that's the win-win, right, that you were talking about, and not to be cliche, because I don't think it is, and I agree with you. I always look at it first as, how can I elevate my customers and bring value to them? And if you do that and prioritize it as such, that value comes back to you and to your organization, which is, I'd like to talk a little bit about that as far as impact, right? So to your internal customers or your organization as a whole, how can advocacy professionals achieve that?
I think it's so important. Everyone understands the value of a reference. I think it's table stakes, and everyone knows that, well, it's great if you get someone to be featured in your marketing assets, but every stakeholder department in an organization they all have stay awake issues. Service is handling tickets, and they're delivering the great service. Or professional services has projects, and they want to accelerate projects, and they have only so much bandwidth. And engineering is trying to put out the next generation product as well as possible without re-engineering, without bugs, and they want to deliver it quickly with the right features and so forth. All of that can be enhanced with opportunities presented to advocates. So a good litmus test is, if you hear your organization, can we use them for this? That's a red flag. No one likes to be used. But when you present an opportunity to one of your clients, hey, here's an opportunity for you to collaborate with our engineering team on next generation product. You can have insight into that. You can give us feedback on, do you like this look or that look better in the next generation product? There's a segment of your customer base who loves that. They like that collaboration. They feel great because you've elevated them personally, and they know that, wow, I feel pretty good because you came to me and asked my opinion. It's now their product as well. Same thing with implementation. You've got people who had a smooth project. They set a couple of goals, and they hit those, and they got out of implementation quickly, and they saw quick ROI. Those are great mentors, and you can introduce them to people in their same industry. Hey, you're in the same industry. We have a new client who's in your space. I could introduce you as a specialist or someone who really gets it and have realized the results quickly. Would you like to be a mentor? And we'll introduce you to this protege. That's valuable to both the new client and the existing client. Similarly with client-to-client support. Service does a wonderful job of resolving issues, but sometimes you can have one client talk to another client that's more industry related. They have, hey, we both have the same tool. How can we support each other? Presenting those opportunities, again, positions your advocate as an expert in the space. It introduces them to people who, in their circle of influence, who are now going to see them, respect their insight and knowledge, and maybe it'll give them their next job opportunity or the next person they could hire. It's really a powerful position to have in an advocacy program. There's really few departments in an organization or stakeholders who couldn't benefit by tapping into an advocacy program. It's like the talent agency for the company.
I love that term. And I speak to a lot of customers and a lot of professionals in this space, but one of the challenges that they have is the difference between people knowing it, logically, and then the feeling it, so that there's true adoption and appreciation for that advocacy role. Do you have any tips for people on how to accelerate that adoption or get that transition to happen?
I think it's very important for senior executives to have a vision of this. And I've been in environments where I've seen that. It's very powerful, where you have the CEO of a company wearing the advocacy program's logo on their T-shirt, in front of the wide audience. And other times when advocacy is thought of, well, it's just how we're going to use those clients. Two very different takes on a program. If senior leadership realizes, hey, we have so many clients, and each of those clients have employees, and a lot of those employees, they're passionate about our product, and they can accelerate revenue. They can give integrity to our marketing messaging. They can help get our product out the door faster and more aligned with the market in their specific industry. They can, reduce our service costs. They can accelerate our implementation timeframes. That's really powerful. It's not a tiny niche solution to an organization. It really helps the whole organization grow through embracing their customers. And it also makes that organization's customer experience that much better. Because if I'm looking at two companies that produce a similar commodity product, and maybe they're leapfrogging each other on the next bell and whistle in the product, but they know that as a professional in that space, by selecting this company with a great customer experience, they're going to select that. Which one's going to advance my career, make me look good, let me meet other people in my space who have the same passion about this solution and product. It's really powerful. So leadership, as they see that, they go, how am I going to grow without hiring thousands of people? You don't have to hire them. They're your customer base.
Excellent advice. And speaking of advice, what advice, what do you wish you would have had, starting out, many years ago as a customer advocacy professional? What would have been something that could have empowered you earlier on?
So I made mistakes early on. Over a decade ago, I was tasked with, hey, you're going to build an advocacy program. It's like, oh, that's great. And so I went to Google and said, what's an advocacy program? That's where I started a long time ago. And I read a lot of books and reached out to some thought leaders in the space. And I started with a gamification model. Like, oh, I'll just cherry pick my happy clients. Who's happy now? And I'll give them, some kind of tchotchke or some swag and a thank you, or maybe a gift card at Starbucks. And they'll do what I ask them to do. I'll challenge them with tasks and burdens, and they'll do it because I'll ask them to. It works a little bit, but then there's this crash. The novelty wears off, and it's like, wow, I'm a burden to them, and they don't want to hear from me. When flipping that around, I think the most important thing is you can gauge every single person who is in your customer base. At 80-20 rule, a lot of them don't want to do this. They want to go home and focus on other stuff. But good maybe 20% of the people who work at your clients and customers, they're passionate about the tools they're using that are provided by your company. And whether they're a detractor, why are they a detractor? They're passionate and they want to tell you. And if you reach out and say, hey, you gave us a low NPS score, or you gave us some feedback that was pretty negative, thank you. Tell us how we can improve. If you do that, put your arms around them, you can turn them into passives and eventually promoters. I've seen that happen. In the same vein, you've got people who are delighted right now. And over time, that might fluctuate, or they change jobs and so forth. So I think that it's so important to present opportunities to your whole customer base to identify those who are truly advocates, who that 20 out of the 80-20, that 20% who are willing to do activities that are everything from being a reference to just feedback on a product or engaging some other way. You can really tap into a huge population. And it's important for, once you identify that, build that, letting stakeholders within your company know. Because engineering is not thinking about the reference program or advocacy program, and service is thinking about how, the cost per ticket and things like that. And implementation is worried about companies that will no start. They'll leave before they even start the project, or maybe the projects go long, or they won't focus on outputs. And these are all things that customer advocates can really contribute to. So market the way that advocates can be engaged to stakeholders throughout your company, even HR. I've had situations where we've asked customers, hey, you selected our company, but did you engage someone who you really thought was fantastic from a competitor? Would you like to refer them to us as maybe a new salesperson? So even recruiting, there's very few areas of the company that can't be supported through the customer base.
And I agree completely. And I've seen some really interesting things happen with HR and even leveraging customer advocates in onboarding for new employees at your company, not the customer's organization, but yet at your own. And Carlos, you mentioned as well, I very much appreciate that when we speak, you are very inclusive, right? When you look at customer advocacy, and you mentioned the detractors and the important role that a detractor can play in, I think we sometimes don't think about how much people just want to be asked. They want to be asked for their feedback and their opinion, and that's really, critical. And sometimes for me anyway, the difference between maybe just a reference and an advocacy program, right? Whereas advocacy is really considering the experience, but references are a really critical piece of it, right? So talk to me a little bit about what makes a good reference, and why people want to be a reference. I think we've touched on that, but so what makes a good reference, and then how do you take that inclusive approach to maybe create good references?
That's a great question. And most people are familiar, in my background in sales, you're familiar with the sales funnel. And so you have to engage your customer base to begin with. And out of those who are engaged, you'll find people who are detractors and passives, but you engage them and you can present opportunities to the detractors. So you have a slightly smaller part of the funnel, which are your advocates, people willing to do things. Some of them are introverts, like I'm an advocate, but I don't want to talk to people. I don't have time. It's not my persona. Maybe I want to do a white paper. I want to contribute in some other way, or I want to contribute it in the engineering plan, but I don't want to talk to people. And others, I want to meet everybody in my space, in my industry, in my geography, introduce me to as many as possible. They really love that. So you have to engage, find advocates, identify the references. When you find a reference, it's really important that they are they talk about the good and the bad. And I think the best way I've always thought of this is if you go to a restaurant and you ask the server, like, what's good on the menu? They say, everything's good on the menu. Yeah, oh, I don't believe them. Something can't be that good. The tuna casserole from last week does not look like the best thing on the menu. Same thing with a reference. When a prospect says, what's good about this company, what's bad about this company, if a reference can say, the product's great, this is strong, the implementation is fantastic, but the reporting needed this, and they listened to us, and we got over that hump, and they're a great partner in the long term. That adds credibility. If they can point to areas where they partnered with a vendor, where maybe the vendor fell down and then got up again, or got back to them, or they heard them and said, we thought this was lacking, this integration took too long, or you couldn't do this, but we partnered with them, and over time they fixed it. Overall, I'd do it all over again. That adds credibility. So I've had references who say everything is great, and I think the prospect's like, well, it's just like a restaurant. Everything's not that great. We need to know what was not that great so we can learn from your experiences. That adds so much credibility.
And honesty is often equated with credibility, right?
Yeah.
A decade ago, I was building out a new advocacy program, and it was a very high touch program, and I would be with customers, and they would kind of, but you just want me to say good things, right? Like asking me point blank, like, of course I want you to say good things, but I also want you to be honest and share where there were stumbles. It's more about the partnership than it is necessarily about, rainbows and puppies and kittens all the time. Because that was always sort of my tagline. We don't want to be a vendor. We want to be a partner, which means it's a relationship, and it means there's work involved. Right. So I love that you call that out. It's important.
Yep. It's so important. And I think it makes them, because anyone who's making a decision on an enterprise piece of software knows it's not one mouse click and you're done. It is a relationship. And they need to know how to best have that partnership. And it's really important to know how they've overcome issues, because they want to talk to someone relatively similar to them, but they're going to have their own unique issues. Is this a vendor who I could partner with? And they want to talk to their peer to hear that.
Yep. And so let's talk about where we find these advocates, right? And where we find, references. And I'm sort of using those terms synonymously right now. But, nominations is sometimes a challenge, especially for those that are starting out. Where do we go? Where do we go to find those advocates?
There are a lot of ways. There's an optimal way, and there's the fast route. So one way is through nominations. Typically, a nomination would be a Salesforce user, either someone who owns the account. I think the whole company owns the account, but there's a person who XYZ company is tied to them, and they might be a service person. Service people are typically dealing with service issues, or they might be a salesperson. Salespeople are selling stuff. So when nominating through sales or service, you have to take into mind that person knows the account if it's a service person through the practitioner who is recording service issues. So they might not know the executive who is passionate about the results. A salesperson might know, well, I closed that deal, but I'm off to selling other stuff. So I think they're good, and I could maybe nominate them as a reference, but I don't know their current state and their state of mind, and that changes. Ideally, it comes back to that engagement, the top end of that funnel. If you're engaging in a program for your customers, and your customers they know that they're part of this customer experience program where they can see opportunities, and you get back to that 80-20%, and that 20% of your customers who are passionate about human capital management, the industry I've been in for a long time, they want to talk about open enrollment over Thanksgiving, not turkey and football. There are people like that who are passionate about that, and it's fantastic. When you tap into those people, whether they're promoters or detractors, you want to engage them with opportunities. So you might engage them as a detractor, and they want to give feedback on why this report does not work well, or your integration took too long. Or maybe they're a passive, but you're engaging them on what their thoughts are for the rest of 2024. Or they're an advocate right now, and they want to network with other people. You can present them with opportunities. I think starting by engaging them early on as a new client, here's a way. Maybe they came in the door as a protege, and they want to talk to a mentor. And you want to present them with opportunity to learn about your organization, about your conferences, and about where's the community, and how do I get help, and what's support look like, and what's your nomenclature, and what do you call an organizational structure, and how does that impact me, and how do I get ready for implementation? So right out of the gate, a good engagement program will engage customers, kind of like onboarding a customer or an employee at a business, but an engagement program will engage those passionate people right out of the gate. And over time, as you learn more about them through engagement, these people would love to network. They have successes and outcomes that they can document. They're passionate about their products. They've given you feedback. Maybe their sentiment has gone up and down, but they're really passionate about the successes that they've had. And if you credit them with those outcomes and say, hey, congratulations, you're pretty great at what you've done, I'd like you to share that with these people. Those are phenomenal references, and they can impact your business in a great way.
And it's okay. I'm gonna go for it. Just put a plug in here for customer experience and how that has become, I think, such an integral piece, because what you're describing, Carlos, is, advocacy programs that are really good. They're really well-oiled machines. They are looking at that full experience, and they're looking at customers on their journey and where they're going from, point A to point B, so that it is indeed that journey. And it's not just, here's a point in time when we touched this particular customer. It's looking at the whole experience. And that is so important, I think.
They'll know that, gee, you only call me when you want something from me.
Exactly.
I didn't hear from you. Then you say, can I speak at your conference? Like, well, okay, that's a neat opportunity. But if you're touching them throughout their experience, saying, you gave us a low NPS score here, I'd like to know why that was. And then later on, we'd love to have your feedback, or what did you think about this or that? And can we coach you on that and share that with others? And then over time, they might get to a point where, hey, there's a very high profile interview with the Wall Street Journal or something like that. Would you have that opportunity? Over time, they go, oh, every time that program touches me, I'm being elevated and recognized, and they want to be heard. It's so important that they, if they're in healthcare and they're scheduling nurses, and that's a very niche area, or if they're in the public sector, they do things differently, or nonprofits are very different. Or if they're in manufacturing or retail, they have their own vernacular, they have their own language, and they want to talk to other people like them. They want to be validated in front of their peers in that space. If you listen to them, the companies I work for have been phenomenal HCM companies, and they know HCM well, but they might not be the deepest expert in these industries. They know the industries to an extent, but not as much as someone who lives as a hospital administrator. As if you say, we want to hear that, we want your perspective, and we recognize your authority in that space, it elevates them. It makes them really appreciate the vendor and the relationship.
And you mentioned, the touch points and reaching out and engaging with everyone. I came in as a psych major. I left as an English major, but there is a Pavlovian kind of response that I always strive to achieve with customers, in the sense that when my email hits your inbox, Carlos, I want you to see my name and think, yes, I want to read that. I would like to see, because we all know the opposite. When there's somebody whose email hits your inbox, and you take a moment because you're not looking forward to what is in there. So it is something I always try to achieve. I want to get the positive reaction when your name pops up in the inbox.
The neat reaction, like, oh, I've got an email from a service person who I love because they help me. So they're emailing me before I even open it. Let's see, I have 10 open tickets, and 2 of them have been open for a long time, and 3 they close. So that's your mind frame is what tickets are they closing for me? And then if they ask you to be a reference or something like that, then it's a quid pro quo of, well, the service person is reaching out to me. What about those service tickets? Or if I get an email from a salesperson and I'm thinking, oh, they're going to sell me something. Last time I talked to them, they're great. They're very, charming and eloquent, and I bought these solutions. I'll negotiate with them. I'll be a reference for you if I get a discount here or there. But if they are contacted by someone in an advocacy program or a customer experience program, like, wow, every time I get an email from Carlos, it's a cool opportunity. I don't want to miss that. Last time he made me look good, or last time he listened to me and elevated me in front of my peers. They can't wait to open it, because it's always a cool surprise that it's not a burden. It's an opportunity, not a challenge or something that is going to take up time. It's something that's of value.
Exactly. And I think, we've highlighted quite a bit why an advocacy program is important, right? And the way I look at it, I see references and reference management as a component of an advocacy program, but I'm going to ask you the question that for 15 years, it still comes up. The little black book or the back pocket references, and why shouldn't we just let sales secure their own references and do their own thing? And how do you, that's kind of, I guess, a double-edged sword. Why should we do it? And then how do we kind of eliminate that back channel reference?
So I don't think you have to. I think that you'll have salespeople who are perennial President's Club winners. They have those relationships. They're amazing. They're superheroes in the sales area, and they close business, and they look for the best ways of closing business. And they might use a back channel reference. They might not. If they do and they close business, it's great. You want to close business first and foremost. But what happens when you have that new salesperson who has joined the company and they don't know, they don't have those relationships? They need to tap into someone. So it's important for an organization to support the whole sales team. So if also a salesperson may know, let's say they are in Wisconsin, there's a certain part of the country, they have that regional knowledge of clients, but they're working with a prospect and there's someone just like them in California or New York or Florida. How are they going to tap into the very best reference? So they're going to go hunt for that. So if you have people who use the little black book methodology, they'll do that for a while. Over time, what I have seen is that if you build a program that presents them with a reference who is so aligned with the prospect, who's passionate, who can talk about the successes that they've had, who came from the competitor that they're selling against, they can be introduced to a prospect and say, hey, I chose this company. I was with the competitor. I chose this company because of these reasons, and I've seen these results, and they're passionate about it. They're not in their little black book. No matter how great it is, it's not going to have every one of those bases covered. So when you build a great program and they start talking about their win-loss reports and, hey, I won this $1 million deal and I tapped into the reference program, they gave me 3 references who knocked the competitor out, who talked about additional products. They increased the basket size of the sale. They accelerated the time to close the deal. They also said they'd be a mentor for this person down the road. That's hard for a salesperson to do. And I'd rather have salespeople spending more time prospecting, selling, closing business than hunting for references. And that, they have a little black book and they know their friends might have them. And there's the point of reference calls it the goat rodeo, which I think is fantastic. And searching for, where am I going to find this reference? It eliminates that. So as you build a program and it gets a reputation, smart sellers will take the path of least resistance and they'll use the program. And they'll realize, I don't have to waste 20% of my time hunting for, these people. I can use the program and it's powerful. It's a competitive advantage for me.
Yep. I love that answer. And I think the important takeaway there is, rather than fighting what is going on, take the time that you would invest to fight the little black book and put it into your program and put it into really advancing your program and the data and looking at where do you have gaps? How can I get the right advocates into the program? Then, like you said, path of least resistance. And I love my sales teams, but they will follow the path of least resistance. That'll help them close the deal and move on. So that's great advice. I'd like to transition a little bit to something that I have been asked quite a bit lately. There's a lot happening in our space. This role is still expanding, but there are a lot of new practitioners coming into the customer advocacy space. So I'd love your perspective on, when you begin a new role at an organization, how do you sort of just take it all in, assess the environment as it relates to what you're about to do as a customer advocacy pro?
I think that there are buzzwords I'd listen for. And there's also people who understand and appreciate and are passionate about advocacy and engagement and great reference programs. They're looking to recognize individual customers and elevate them and highlight their successes and present them with opportunities that impact them personally, advance them professionally. That's such a great feeling. It's like being an ice cream truck driver. You're handing out ice cream cones and no one has to pay for them. It's great. Or if you go into an environment and you say, well, shoot, I've got this deal that's going to close. I need to use these people. Did we use them last week? And how many times have we used that person? Can we ask them to do this for us? And if you hear saying, a conference is coming up, or press release is coming up, or an analyst needs to talk to clients. Who could we use? Who's not burned out? A lot of times they're thinking of themselves, and while it's still having them act as a reference, in one way you're presenting an opportunity. In other ways, culturally, that customer was used and thrown away and kind of ignored, and their preferences weren't taken into consideration. References takes preferences into consideration in the way that people are engaged, which is fantastic. How frequently, with what type of people do they want to speak with, and are they available now, or have we presented too many opportunities? Even though they like them, you can see how many you presented, things like that. But new organizations, when they first think about this, they always look at the shortcut, and they keep taking shortcuts of, we'll send them a gift card. Well, we need more residents. Double the value of the gift card. And those shortcuts lead to long-term gaps in programs being viable. So there isn't a shortcut to falling in love with your customer. That oxytocin program where you really respect them, you want to hear from them, you want to engage everybody, not try to cherry pick the people who are happy at that moment, because that's fluid. Today's promoter could become tomorrow's passive, and vice versa. So I think it's so important to have that anticipation of what's in it for the customer. And every program that you have, every opportunity presented, it should start with, why would someone want to do this? If you don't know why they'd want to do it, what the WIFM is for the advocate or for the customer, and I'm saying customer because sometimes they're not an advocate, but people who aren't advocates, they're just engaged. They want to be heard. They're passionate. What's in it for them? If you understand that, and it's not a gift card, it's a motivational driver, then you're on the right path, because you can present all kinds of opportunities, little ones and huge ones, and it's a CX differentiator.
I agree, and just to call out a couple of those things, the nuances, listening for the words that are being used, and then you mentioned the culture, and I think that is something really huge. It's very easy to talk the talk. It's not as easy to walk the walk, and you have to look at that. And you already mentioned this, Carlos, but the leadership, right? And we hear terms like it's top down and getting support from executives and internal stakeholders. How have you done that, and how have you had success with making sure that you have that executive support?
I think it's a great idea to have transparency into the programs. It's a challenge to do that. At times, the mandate comes from the top. At other times, it's a culture where you're trying to change the culture. So knowing that when you go into an opportunity, career-wise, is very important. Who's asking for this program? Are they do they see this as a junior position, or do they? I was a very tenured sales guy. My DNA was sales and marketing, and I was a very successful salesperson. I went into advocacy from that spot, and I knew the HCM space, and I knew the competition, I knew the persona of the typical stakeholders and how to engage them. I wasn't green to the industry. So I think it's important to look at an organization that wants to focus on someone who's really passionate about the space, passionate about the outcomes that can be realized by the products being sold, and who understands those, who wants to highlight their customer successes. And that should be, the whole organization should want that. They should see that as a big competitive advantage. And they should see that as important as the product they're selling, the services they're providing, that CX should be a differentiator. They say, yeah, everyone can present this product or service, and everyone installs it, and everyone sells the product or service, but those people whose careers depend on your product and service, are they going to be elevated by working with you, or is it a commodity to them? And I think that CX is a big differentiator. And if that's the culture where they want to have that commitment to elevating their customers, that's a great environment.
I agree. And I think it's sometimes I spend time coaching, and that's one of the things I say, if you're in an interview process, ask some of these questions. And I think that is, absolutely all right to do, to find out, where is this coming from, right? Where is the buy-in, et cetera. So we've got a program, you're in, and it's running. How do you make sure it stays, that it has staying power and sustainability?
So over the years, things ebb and flow and they evolve, and I think it's very important to perpetually sell the value of a program. So don't do it once. You'll celebrate victories and successes. I think ongoing transparency into metrics is really important. So it's great to show revenue influenced by references, but what about that ongoing group of people who are doing user acceptance testing for engineering, or who are in a product advisory board or a customer advisory board, and showing that and kind of marketing yourself to the stakeholders in an organization? Would the company have been able to have that transaction? Would their Gartner reviews be as strong? Would their retention be as good? Would the engineering be as fast? Would implementation, the number of no starts? That's a pretty common issue where clients sign up and they leave before they even start because there's a backlog in implementation, so forth. People rarely think of the solution to that being an advocacy program, but it can be. So remembering to remarket those results, represent those results to leadership, and attribute it back to that program. I think it's very important to brand the program. Give it a cool name. So once you name the program, budget can go towards it, recognition can go towards it, industry recognition can go towards it. Your customers go, oh yeah, that's that program, that really strong brand name, and it becomes a living entity, a living, breathing, entity unto itself.
It has an identity.
It does. It has an identity. It's not just, oh, they use me as a reference. It's part of that really cool program that I'm a member of that special club, and they recognize me. They hear me in that. It's advanced my career.
I love that, and I agree. And we could talk for another 45 minutes probably about brand of a program and how important that can be. But I'd like to also ask you about, maybe it's the elephant in the room, I don't know, but the like misconnects and disconnects about customer marketing and advocacy. I'll use the CMA term here. What do you think, and what have you seen over your career?
I think that with any topic, there are people who are geeks about it, and I'm a self-professed customer advocacy geek. I love it. I like the psychology behind it. I like the operational aspect. I like the tech stack integrations and how you tip a domino over here, and at the end of the day, this one falls over there, and you have success. And putting that all together is really pretty cool, especially with the win-win. You're advancing your customers' careers. You're resolving your company's departmental objectives. You're helping them reach their goals. Too often, it's not seen as a comprehensive topic. It's like, oh, it's just a shortcut. That we'll just ask them to do this. And so I've seen it comes back to that culture, but very often there's can't we just do this? So as you talk to stakeholders and senior stakeholders and people who've been in an environment for a long period of time, it's like, well, we've never done it that way, so we're not going to do it that way. This is how we handle that problem. They take the shortcut, and those shortcuts perpetuate an ineffective environment. The status quo does not work for a reason. You have those issues, those ongoing issues are for a reason, because you've always taken the shortcut. It's that just use them, or we'll try to just identify who's happy right now and then store them away as though they're going to be happy forever. Advocates are people. Their sentiment changes, their jobs change, they have a child, they come back from maternity leave, their careers change. That sometimes they're delighted, other times they're frustrated. So that's ongoing engagement. If you don't have ongoing engagement, you really have no insight into who your advocates are and then who your references really are, and that's important to see.
It's critical, and I know I tout it all the time, the people before professionals, but we really are, and life happens. I mean, we are not tethered to our desk 24/7. Thank goodness. I mean, we have lives, and understanding that, getting to know it, making connections between, a personal life and a professional life, that's where it really helps also, I think, with the engagement piece.
It does.
Overall.
Yeah.
It's huge. Thank you. And while we have a couple of minutes here, I'd like to ask this question of everyone. What is the number one piece of advice that I asked you what you wish you would have heard, but what is your number one piece of advice for CMA professionals today?
I think that in the family of professionals on LinkedIn for the last decade, there's been waves of the bright shiny object and the next technology, and maybe some technologies wane and go away and come and go. At the core, keep in mind this is listening to people. People want to be heard. Your customers want to be heard, and respecting that. They want to be respected. They want to know that you care about them, and if they feel that way, they'll. When you reach out to them, they go, "Oh, this is a person who cares, and they're not using me, and this is available use of my time. I'll read this email. I'll go to your environment, or I'll see that in-app notification, that email, that phone call, that text, whatever it may be. It's always of value to me. Keep that in mind, and then also think of the big picture. If you look at just the head count of people in your organization, how many salespeople do you have, and how many people are in service or engineering and so forth, and then look at your customer base, and at each one of your customers, you have a practitioner who's knee-deep in the product. You have stakeholders who are benefiting from the product. You have an executive who cut the check to say, yes, we'll keep that SaaS subscription going. You have this army that is exponentially larger than your employee count. They can be tapped into from the executive level to the practitioner level to advance your company. That customer-led growth is so powerful. You can tap into this large volume of people, not just, you can engage them as references, that's great, but what about all these other areas where you can engage people who their career has been advanced because they're using your payroll, your HR, your time, or whatever the solution is? That's really powerful. And so don't undercut how much you can engage them. And I don't think I've ever had anyone say, "Oh, I'm getting too many opportunities," or "You're giving me too few opportunities to meet new and interesting people." And they always want more. That's the feedback I always get. So sometimes people are, if you feel a weird feeling about, "Oh, I'm shy about asking them to do something," don't. Present them with an opportunity that impacts them. That's an easy call to make when you're bringing value to someone. Make sure you're bringing value, and it kind of changes your job. No one likes to burden people or ask them or bother them, but people do like to give things and to elevate people and compliment them. That's a whole paradigm shift. It's a neat way to work.
I love that. I love that. Make the ask. And you also pointed out, Carlos, that the customers, this is your army of advocates that you have. It is essentially an extension of your employee base. So I'm going to go ahead and tack on, when we think about hiring and building a strong customer advocacy function and a customer marketing team, strong individuals that can lead that and drive that initiative tap into the army. And therefore, by extension, so I just think that I'm running with it a little bit, but that is so worth the investment internally. And I so appreciate your time today. And I have even more questions that I could ask of you, but thank you very, very much for being generous with your time and being here.
Love the topic. Thanks. I appreciate the relationship with Point of Reference. Just a phenomenal company to work with, from product to people as well. So thank you for the session, and I look forward to continued great experiences.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to bookmark it wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow me, Alison Bukowski, on LinkedIn, and a special thank you to Point of Reference for supporting this podcast. For over 20 years, Point of Reference has been the Salesforce native solution to solve a myriad of customer advocacy and reference management challenges. It's our goal to elevate the professionals within this space to achieve business goals and drive their programs forward as vital to business success. Contact me to learn more.